Hello, good evening, and welcome everybody to this Prevent Breast Cancer Update Hour. I'm Gordon Burns, your host for the evening, and also a very proud patron of the Prevent Breast Cancer charity. I was, there right from the launch when, of course, it was Genesis, more years ago than I would care to remember at this minute. But welcome to you all. Isn't it different? A whole difference to what we normally do. This time last year, we had a fantastic building. We had an audience over 100. Many of you were probably there. We had all our consultants and experts on their various research programs to talk to. And breast cancer charity actually funds all those, or most of those that we talked about with them. And then it was open to your questions from the floor. That's how we've done it for quite a few years now. Obviously, we've had to change a lot this time. And one of the casualties, if you like, of having to do it this way are your questions. Sadly, we won't be able to take them using this medium tonight, but we hope to do more of these in the months ahead, and it may well be then that we can have your questions. So that's something to look forward to in the future. So, as I say, much has had to change, but one thing sadly hasn't changed. And they are the stark statistics about breast cancer. Just look at those. 1 in 9 women in the UK will get the disease at some stage. And the unfortunate news is more people are getting breast cancer every year. I say women there. I mean, men get it too. It's 1 in 1,000 men, but we're talking mostly women here, obviously. 55,000 this year alone will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And that means, if you break it down, that 150 women will have been told this very day that they have breast cancer. So you can imagine just how they are feeling tonight. And many of you watching may well have gone through that situation as well. And I said 55,000 will be diagnosed, 11,500 will not survive breast cancer. And 1 in 10 breast cancers are diagnosed late. So imagine if we could get it earlier, which is the great push to do, how many lives could be saved. And Prevent Breast Cancer, our charity, is trying hard to bring all those figures down, and eventually our goal to eradicate breast cancer completely. And already the research programs that we funded down the years, along with other research programs, have resulted in better treatments, breakthroughs, so that more women are surviving breast cancer than ever before. And that is the good news. Despite more people catching it, more people are surviving it than ever before, thanks to all the research that's gone on. So to the big question of the day, the current situation. How has COVID-19 and lockdown impacted on all that we do as a charity? And importantly, too, how has lockdown affected breast cancer patients and their treatments? And are we anywhere close to getting back to a near normal service? So to get the answers, I'll be interviewing 3 of our top breast cancer experts, 2 of whom will join us through the wonders of technology from their homes. And the third one, Prevent Breast Cancer Chairman and Consultant Surgeon Lester Barr, is here in this very splendid building in Broadheath, kindly provided to us by Pixel Inspiration, who are great supporters of our charity, and we thank them profusely for their generosity. So that's what's coming up in the next hour. Interviews with Lester Barr. There you see him on how our Prevent Breast Cancer charity is coping with the loss of so many funding events. Can we survive? He'll also talk about the exciting National Breast Imaging Academy to be built here and update you on the current breast screening situation. I'll be talking to Dr. Sacha Howell on how the Christie Hospital was forced to reorganize itself to cope with the lockdown and COVID-19 virus, what lockdown meant for patients, and the very latest situation there on appointments, on chemotherapy and other treatments. And he'll have some good news, I can tell you, in that. And Professor Kirwan, or Cliona if you like it, but Cliona as it should be, on how serious a setback was for early diagnosis and the current situation, which I know will interest quite a few of you out there, current situation relating to breast reconstruction operations. She'll talk to us a bit about that too. So that is what is ahead in the next hour. Hope you enjoy it. Sorry you can't ask questions. I hopefully will ask all the ones you'd like to ask. So here we go then. Let's talk to Lester Barr then, our chairman. And who'd have thought, Lester, when we did that update to public meeting last year, that 12 months on, we would be in this situation. It's absolutely astonishing. And of course, our purpose as a charity is to raise large sums of money, as I pointed out, by staging a whole range of weird, wonderful and spectacular events, which we're very good at. Vital money, which goes to fund our important research projects. But COVID has struck. Lockdown arrived late March, still with us in some form or other. No public events, no gatherings permitted. A huge blow to the charity of fundraising. So the big question, how has it hit our Prevent charity?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Most of our income comes from fundraising groups and committed individuals, many of whom are watching this evening. We don't have public funding, and so it came as a huge shock when lockdown arrived, because all of our fundraising events really do rely on people getting together to do things together. I guess the background is that when we were in March, before lockdown, it looked as if we were heading towards having our best year ever of fundraising. And in fact, by the end of March, we had indeed raised £1.3 million, which is more than we've ever raised before. And that turned out to be a real blessing, because when lockdown was announced and everything shut down, we were looking over the edge of a precipice thinking, oh, good grief, we're about to plunge into no income at all, and having to rely on our reserves. We have reserves about 9 months to keep things going. However, things surprisingly turned out not as bad as we feared, partly because of the furlough project, the furlough scheme, with our staff on rotation coming in and out of furlough, and partly because our fundraising team just came up with some wonderfully creative ideas for fundraising during lockdown. So that's made a big difference, and so we've continued to have some income coming in. And
so let me put this to you then. Well, happily we've got funding coming in, but obviously nowhere near the levels of before. So how badly has this lack of funding hit our research programs that we fund? Like last year, we were talking about the current research programs going on and what they hope to achieve. How have they been impacted by what's happened and the lack of money?
Okay, well, the background, as many viewers will know, is that here in Manchester, we have the biggest collaborative group looking into how to prevent breast cancer. And we have what's called 4 pillars of research. So we're looking at genetics, we're looking at environmental factors such as diet and lifestyle, we're looking at means of early diagnosis and screening, and we're looking at preventative drugs. And those different avenues of research roughly fall into 2 types. There's laboratory research carried out in a number of labs around the city and beyond Manchester. And then there's clinical research involving patients. The lab research simply shut off as soon as lockdown was announced, because the university was instructed to essentially send people home, work from home. And if you're working with cells and test tubes, that don't work at home. The clinical research also temporarily stopped. Things like taking blood samples, breast tissue samples, saliva samples for gene testing, etc. All of that had to stop as well. So our research stopped. Now, thankfully, much of it has begun to get up and running again. So the labs are back in action. Some of the clinical research is back in action again, but it is very difficult in the current climate. The real issue for us is that the pipeline is frozen. This is a problem not just for us, but also for Cancer Research UK, Breast Cancer Now, really all the major cancer charities have had to simply stop funding new projects. And this is very disappointing for us because we got so many great ideas and great plans, research projects that we want to fund next, which we can't because our income is down. So that's how I would express the current situation.
So just to sum up, the current research programs that have been going on that we talked to at this event last year, etc., they will go on and continue. We have the money until they are completed, but
Yes.
Nothing more will be commissioned at this stage. That is the situation. And how serious is that then for all the work we do and moving forward with dealing with breast cancer and trying to wipe it out altogether? How big a setback is this?
A lot depends on what happens next with the second wave. If it doesn't stop universities functioning, if it doesn't stop hospitals functioning at the normal levels, then hopefully we can get back into our research quite quickly, and we'll just be talking about a delay of some months. Our ability to unfreeze the pipeline really depends on our fundraising over the next few months. So having had an income of 1.3 million last year, we are hoping our target is about 500,000 this year. So that gives you an idea that the amount of research we can fund next year might be less than half of what we're currently doing. So it's a big concern for us.
Yeah, the reality of this, of the current restrictions, etc., on public gatherings, on mixing, could well, the reality is they could well go on for, and we're led to believe they will, for up to 6 months. And indeed, and heaven forbid, they could go on even beyond that. How long could Prevent Breast Cancer as a charity survive in such a scenario?
We're determined to keep both our research team in place and our fundraising team in place. And the trustees are confident we can do that through a combination of the government schemes, our reserves policy, and our continuing socially distanced fundraising. That combination gives us real confidence that we're going to survive this, and at the end of it we'll have lots of new ideas, new initiatives, and a fundraising team who are great, who will come back into full swing, and a research team who are great, that we can then release and say, right, our pipeline is now open, please get on with it, we've got the funding for you, you've got the ideas, we've got the funding, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging. And I mean, our ability, obviously, to raise money and quickly at this time is all the more essential because of a fantastic new project that is taking place that will be an exciting addition to the Nightingale Centre. And that is, of course, the building of a brand new National Breast Imaging Academy. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Tell us more about it. I mean, what is this academy and what is it for?
This is to train up radiologists, that's doctors, radiographers, they're the people who take the mammograms, advanced practitioners, people who might do breast biopsies and get really heavily involved in the screening program, take on apprentices of various types through a program of training so that they become the breast cancer specialists and experts of the next generation. Even before COVID, there was beginning to emerge a national shortage of expert radiologists, and the government has issued a report saying that they do indeed want to recruit more. And the National Academy that we hope to host here in Manchester will help to train the next generation of those specialists.
Good. Well, let's just have a look at an artist's impression of the building so that people can see what it's all about. We've got a picture there to show you. You can see that. I mean, talk us through that in terms of what we are seeing and its position in relation to the Nightingale Centre. I mean, tell us about it. Well, talk us through it.
Well, those of you who are familiar with the Nightingale Centre in Manchester, which hosts the Prevent Breast Cancer Research Unit. As you come into the car park towards the building, this will be on the left-hand side.
Can we just look at the picture again, if that's possible? So just keep it up there while we talk through it. Yeah, go on.
So this building will be on the left-hand side of our existing building with that glass corridor connecting it. And on the ground floor will be new mammography rooms, ultrasound rooms, biopsy rooms, clinical areas, which will be dedicated for teaching. So if you were a patient, you'll come in through the front door, register at the front door, and you may go into the middle of the building for the usual process of being tested, or someone may say, do you mind if we take you to the left of the building, where you will be assessed in a sort of in a slower environment. So instead of, for example, an ultrasound scan taking a quarter of an hour, it might take 20-25 minutes as one of our experts teaches a trainee. So you'll be assessed by a trainee, supervised by one of the expert consultants in a slightly quieter environment that's not so rushed. That's the aim behind this building.
So it's a training facility. You've talked through all the people that are going to be there. I mean, how long does it take, for instance, to train a mammographer or a radiologist, etc.? How long would they be there for?
Well, we're looking very carefully at models of teaching that will speed this all up. So if we can train a mammographer within a year from scratch, that would be our target. If we take a doctor who's working perhaps in general practice, for example, again, with intense training over a year or so, they could become a breast specialist clinician. If you're training in radiology, X-rays training, then we hope to attract some to say, actually, why don't you take on breast cancer as your major specialty? And again, with a year of intensive training with us, we can give them the expertise that they need to become the breast specialist radiologist. I mean, it's a resource for the whole country. So although they might be trained physically in this building, they could then, it would be a resource for the whole of the UK. So
what, off the top of your head, what do you think the total number of staff would be in that building?
Well, I'm going to talk first of all about the UK. We reckon that we need to train up perhaps 200 new radiologists across the country over the next few years. So if we're going to do that, we might have to have 20, 30, 40, 50 every year coming through the building on a rotational basis. A lot of the teaching can in fact be done online, and that's already up and running. So we've got programs up and running already so that people can learn the theory from online material, but the actual hands-on practicality, you do need to be in a clinical environment with real patients coming through with real situations and real diagnosis being made.
Well, that's an interesting point. So I was going to say to you, is it just for training, or is it for practical use? Will patients, as you seem to be suggesting there, actually go there for imaging or anything else?
Oh yes, it will increase the capacity of the building by allowing more patients to come through. It will be a slower track because they'll be seeing a trainee and a supervising consultant together. So it will take you longer to go through the system, perhaps, yeah. But with with that sort of intensive teaching going on as you, a patient, are being assessed.
So the trainees will actually be carrying out their tasks on patients, which might worry some patients.
Well, I can assure you there's no danger there. Having trained, obviously, as a surgeon all those years, they don't just give you a scalpel and say, have a go. It's, I'll show you what you do. And under supervision, it's completely safe.
So let's get down to the nitty gritty then, Lester. How much will it cost to build and equip this academy?
Well, the good news, I guess, is that the equipment is paid for, and we have funding for that. The staffing, we have funding for that. And so the money that we're hoping to raise is purely bricks and mortar for the building. Yeah. It's a £7 million project. We're about a third of the way there. And so one of the things that our fundraising team are doing now that they can't go out with public events is spending more time with trust funds, looking for other sources of income. And this is a collaboration with the NHS. So some of the money is coming from, it's not just from us. And we're talking to other charities, Breast Cancer Now, will all be involved in it. So it will be a truly collaborative project, a bit like our current prevention centre. If you remember when you opened it all those years ago, this was Europe's first, in fact, I think probably the world's first breast cancer prevention centre. That was a collaboration between the NHS and the charity, and this will be a similar collaborative venture.
Well, as you say, a third of the money has been raised, on the way to about 7 million, but quite frankly, this couldn't be a worse time to try and raise charity funding, really. When does the money have to be in place if you're going to get started on time? And are you confident that you can do it?
Well, we have one particular large trust fund who is willing to double our money. So if we can raise so many thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds, then they will match it. So that sort of matching scheme, I think, will give us real encouragement. And if our supporters can, get behind this project and help us get funds in place for the bricks and mortar of the National Academy, then the money will be doubled. And then, of course, the NHS will be working alongside us as well. So with these multiple streams, we hope to maybe by early next year or middle of next year to secure that sort of funding. However, without the public fundraising, the whole thing will drag on, and we're keen to get on with this as soon as we can.
So, okay, well, it's hoping to go sometime next year, March, April, May, to start the building. When will it all end? When will the doors open and the trainees arrive on site?
Well, there's two ways to answer that question. One is to say that some of the training is already happening through the online scheme, which is good. And the building itself, that lovely drawing you saw, the architect's drawing, the estimate is that the build time from beginning to end should be less than a year. So once we've got the funding in place and give it the green light, then it could be we'd be in there within a year.
Splendid stuff. I think we'll leave it there for now, Lester. Thank you very much. And we're going to see you back at the end of the program to talk about the current situation with breast screening, which I know a lot of people watching will be very interested in. The current situation with breast screening, and then obviously some final words for our wonderful Prevent Breast Cancer supporters, how they can help us and so on. But for now, you can sit back and relax. Thank you. Thanks very much, Lester. And I mean, those of you who are listening to me at the beginning when I said he's in the same building as me might be wondering why he isn't sitting beside me during that interview. And well, it's all, of course, down a bit to social distancing, and also because I'm delivering it to you in a laptop. And therefore, my camera is just right up there in front of my nose. And if Lester was to sit here, he certainly couldn't be 6 feet away from me. We'd almost be right in each other's faces. So that's why he's actually in the next office, out the door, and he's in the next office talking to us there. Now, you'll notice going across the bottom of your screen, this will happen every so often through the program, are ways in which you could donate. As you heard from Lester there, we've got to raise all this money, particularly for the new academy. And everybody can help. And if you can in any way help or think of ways we could raise money or anything, we'd love to hear from you, and Lester will talk a bit about it at the end. But that's what will go across the screen every so often. But we want to move on now to our second interview, which is with Sacha Howell. And Sacha is Senior Lecturer and Honorary Consultant in Medical Oncology. And there he is joining us from home now in the pleasant comfort of his own home. Hi, Sacha. You can hear me, I hope.
Yeah. Hello, Gordon. Good. Hello, everybody.
Great. Well, of course, you work at one of the very best cancer hospitals in the country, the Christie. So what I'd like you to do first is to talk us through what happened at the Christie when the full UK national lockdown began on March the 23rd. It lasted until May the 6th. That was around 6 weeks, and it's more or less continued in some form or another since. It must have been a nightmare period for patients there, for doctors there, the rest of the staff there. What was the full impact of coronavirus there at the Christie?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary, Gordon. It was a nightmare, and I think particularly for the patients. We were relatively protected at the Christie in terms of, for example, intensive care, where you have a district general or big teaching hospitals with large intensive care units. They were really overwhelmed by the numbers of very sick patients. That in itself wasn't really the main issue for the Christie. We did, however, have to make some pretty major changes in terms of setting up a separate COVID area. So patients that did have COVID had to be, if you like, sealed off. That's a rather extreme way of putting it, but that's what it felt like compared to the rest of the hospital. And we immediately, lost a fair number of staff, as most of our hospitals did. We understood that there were risk factors for contracting COVID, and therefore the staff that were at risk were effectively sent home and had to work from home where they could. When you cut the workforce like that by about 20 to 30%, you're going to be running out of people to do the job that you need to do. In addition to having to spread people between COVID secure and COVID insecure places, then you've got a problem in your ability to deliver your stock in trade, which for us, certainly from a breast oncologist perspective, will be treatments like chemotherapy and other systemic therapies.
So, well, let's talk about that. I mean, what happened with patients who are undergoing treatments like chemotherapy, or indeed were about to start it, because it was all suspended immediately for a while, wasn't it? So that sounds to me pretty serious, because when you get to chemo, you need that chemo, you need it as quickly as possible, and they weren't going to be able to get it, were they?
So there was an initial serious concern because, of course, chemotherapy is well known for lowering your white blood cells, increasing your risk of infection. And so we have this terrible pandemic coming. We have a disease or an illness, that can result in serious morbidity and death in many thousands of people. So the last thing that we want to do is to treat with a treatment that could increase people's susceptibility to that kind of infection. And the first data that came out of China, which was a really small study, and I don't think people realized just how much we were scrabbling around to try and find any evidence we could of whether it was still safe to treat or not. And the first study from China that said there was a really high risk of serious COVID infection if we gave chemotherapy actually only had 18 patients in it, and only 4 of them had breast cancer. So we were trying to base all of our decisions on really limited data. And I think this has been the story, really, that's made it very difficult, not necessarily wanting to defend the government, but, it's been very difficult to get accurate information on which to base our decisions. But what we did was we looked at what is the need for chemotherapy on an individual basis. If there was an urgent need for treatment, then we went ahead. If there was a borderline indication for chemotherapy, then we wouldn't go ahead. We'd have a discussion with the patient saying that we think that the risks outweigh the benefits and perhaps not to proceed. Now,
just explain a second here, because as a layman and so on, and many people out there will be thinking the same. My understanding is that if you have chemotherapy, it sort of almost wipes out your immune system. I mean, you have to be kept away from getting infections and so on. And with COVID going around and the rate it was going around, one would have thought immediately there would be no chance of giving anyone chemotherapy because of the danger they'd then be in with a much reduced immune system.
Yep. So we were all really worried about that as well. But when you look at actually the number of people who were being infected, even though there were large absolute numbers in the country, per patient number, so per 100,000 or so, and if you're only getting 100 or 200 or 300 people, it's still much more likely you won't get infected. Right. So with appropriate screening of people and shielding, of people, then it should still have been safe to deliver chemotherapy for those at the greatest need. Actually, what then was shown in subsequent publications, first from Europe and then from the UK itself, is that actually chemotherapy in patients with breast cancer really doesn't increase the risk of a serious or life-threatening COVID infection much at all. So, in fact, we were being overcautious at the start. And when we started to realize that through sort of April, May time, we really then were kind of reassured that what we were doing by going ahead with chemotherapy was still the right thing to do.
Right.
And please, Gordon, don't ask me why that is, because you're quite right.
My next question is in there. So I asked what evidence, there was that suggests it's safe for people who have breast cancer to have chemotherapy. And is it just people, just explain them more, is it just people with breast cancer who you can go ahead with this chemotherapy, or is it right across the board, anybody who has it?
No, there are groups that are at higher risk. So anybody with what we call a solid tumor, so a lump, whether it's developed in the breast or the lung or the colon, seems to be reasonably safe. The issue is the hematological cancers, so things like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma. Now, those patients do seem to be at increased risk, both as an increased background risk, but also increased risk if they are on active therapy. And that's probably something to do with the type of cancer it is affecting their immune system already. So the immune system, we all talk about the immune system, don't we, as being, oh, I'm going to take a tablet of this or a drink of that to boost my immune system. It's an incredibly complex thing. And it probably is to do with the specific subset of white cells that are targeting COVID. If you've got a deficiency in those, then you're at increased risk of a serious infection. And it doesn't seem to be that chemotherapy affects those cells as much as certain hematological cancers themselves.
Fascinating. Sorry, we get a bit of interference coming here. That's why I'm pausing, but I'll carry on anyway, regardless. Earlier you were saying very much everybody was floundering when this first hit us and how to find the way forward and looking for information and so on. So it's been a steep learning curve. But of course, many top experts believe that a second wave, if we're not already into it now, a second wave of coronavirus, similar to the first one, maybe even worse, is inevitable, if not now, then this winter. So I'm wondering, from what you've learned, has some sort of master plan been drawn up at the Christie to deal with it much better than the first time when everyone was floundering, based on the lessons learned and the increased knowledge? Are you ready for it if it happens again?
We're much better prepared. So what we have done for time immemorial is have face-to-face consultations. We like to bring people from all the way around, the sort of catchment area of any of the hospitals. We want them to come in, park in overcrowded car parks, walk through crowded corridors, and then wait for 3 hours for a 10-minute consultation. Now, I'm not proud of the fact that that's how some of my clinics run either. Since COVID, an awful lot of patients are now not seen in the hospital at all. They're either telephoned for their consultation or seen in a virtual face-to-face, very much like this. And so that change has already happened. It hasn't been seamless. It's been very difficult to do. And I think that a lot of patients have caught the rough edge of that, because it's, waiting in for quite a long time for telephone calls. You've got a relative waiting with them. They've then had to leave, and then the call comes. So it's been difficult to organize. And I really sympathize with the patients for that. But I think that now we're getting a lot better at that. If there is, or we know there is, a second wave, we're already riding it to some extent. But as it comes through more, we're better prepared from that perspective. What I'm still concerned about, though, is that we don't have good enough ways of keeping our staff at work. So in terms of delivering the treatments or doing the surgery, or whatever it is in terms of cancer therapy, we need staff to do it in the hospitals. And if we don't have rapid testing to keep people in work and reliable testing, then we're going to have to be quarantining staff, and we'll be back where we were. All right, those staff can do outpatient appointments, but they can't deliver the chemotherapy or do the surgery unless they're in the hospital. So better prepared, but I'm still nervous about what's to come. And we have to keep social distancing, and we have to keep taking this seriously. Otherwise, we're going to be back to square one.
But that's a fair point. What I'd like you to say at this moment is the advice you would give to people who may well have an appointment at the Christie and need to go there, but are seriously concerned about COVID and picking up an infection and so on, particularly when you see the figures in Manchester in particular absolutely skyrocketing the infection rate. What is your advice to them if they've got that appointment, but they're worried about what will happen when they get there?
Come. I would say, don't be worried about coming. Please wear a mask when you're, if you need to come by public transport, or even if you're coming in the car, just wear the mask the whole way. I would say just wash your hands regularly, have a hand sanitizer, it's a little bottle of hand sanitizer with you, regularly clean your hands. Any of the staff in the hospital who are interacting with you will be wearing a mask. It's compulsory for us all. And everything is being cleaned constantly to keep it as clean as it can be. But you can do a lot yourself to just make sure that everything you're touching, your hands are as clean as they can be, keeping them away from your face, and distancing. Do your best to distance, and we're all following our one-way streets around the hospital, so that we're doing our best as well, not to do excessive mingling, which is clearly a dangerous thing.
But the bottom line is, if you have an appointment, make sure you go for it. Don't get worried and stay away. It's better that you go, and you'll be as safe as you can make it.
That's absolutely right. But if you think that you're well and you don't need to come, you think that actually, I think my appointment could be just as easily done over the telephone, then get in touch with your consultant secretary or the outpatient administrators and say, I think this should be a telephone consultation because I'm fine. Is there a reason I need to come? We're going through every clinic and we're trying to identify patients who definitely need to come and those that can stay at home and have a telephone or a virtual consultation. If we get that wrong, tell us, and then you won't need to come. But if you do need to, the only reason we're doing that is to limit the number of people, because that makes it even safer for the ones that do have to come. And there are some cases when you will have to, but that, the Christie, and in fact, most hospitals, now that we're prepared, are relatively safe places to come to.
Right. Now, while I've got you here, we're almost at the end of the interview, but while I've got you here, we can't let you go without talking about one of your big areas of interest, which is the necessity to screen high-risk breast cancer patients, presumably reasonably regularly. Now, we are going to be talking about breast screening very shortly with Lester, so I'll just keep this one tight just to get your opinion that screening, of course, had to be suspended. So explain what happened and how you combated that situation. And by doing so, can you just explain high risk that we're talking specifically about here?
So the high risk that we deal with at the Nightingale are those who have come through the clinic with a family history of breast cancer and those that have been identified as carrying a a gene mutation, for example, BRCA1, BRCA2, there are increased risk of breast cancer and need annual mammograms or MRI scans from as young as the age of 25. And we know that, every year we will pick up quite a high number of cancers in those women. And it wasn't just the standard NHS breast screening program that was suspended, it was the high-risk screening as well. And we ended up with a backlog of around about 1,300 cases who should have come through for their annual mammograms or MRIs that were then waiting and that they were delayed. That's concerning. We know, and we know from getting going again, that there were cancers in that group of patients. Now, fortunately, it wasn't delayed that long. The longest was around about 6-7 months worth of delay. Nobody wants that to happen. There's a reason we're doing annual screening. It's because we think it's needed at that frequency. But I know you want to keep it tight. I want to just really say an enormous thank you to the team at the Nightingale of radiographers, radiologists, and all of the support staff who have just worked incredibly hard to get that back up and running again and clear the backlog. And we're almost there. I think I'm pretty sure that we are there now. And that was a heroic effort. I won't name check anybody, but you know who you are. It was a fantastic effort. And I think that the women of Greater Manchester can really, really be pleased with the way that the team have worked so hard to get that done.
Yeah. Strong point. Well said, well made, Sacha. We will leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for being with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gordon.
That's right. Fascinating stuff. We have one more to talk to, and then Lester back at the end. So we're coming to that in just a second, but just to remind you what's going across the bottom of the screen there. If any of this has inspired you to donate, we're not beating about the bush. We need money, and if you can help us in any way, no matter how small, it all counts. So you've got all the numbers there, etc. What you need to do if you want to contribute to the charity. So on we go then to Professor Cliona Kirwan. I say Cliona because it's an Irish name and that's how it's not normally pronounced, but she says everybody here will call her Cliona, so fine, Cliona Kirwan. She's a consultant oncoplastic breast surgeon and chair, of course, of Prevent Breast Cancer Scientific Advisory Board. That's the board that considers what's new research should be undertaken and awards the funds to do it. And she is with us again, and also she is a breast cancer reconstruction surgeon, and we're going to be talking about that reconstructive surgery in the course of this interview. Good evening to you, Cliona.
Good evening, Gordon, and hello to everyone else who's out there.
Right, well, early diagnosis, as we keep hearing, early diagnosis and early appropriate treatment, absolutely key to a successful outcome for breast cancer patients. Now, obviously, these two key factors would have been very badly hit as a result of the lockdown and the period after that. So we need to find out how bad and serious that impact was. What's your assessment?
I suppose you're asking me how many people did we not find with cancer? And to answer that question, well, we haven't found them, so we don't know. But to give you a ballpark idea, I suppose the Nightingale Centre is one of the biggest, or the biggest breast cancer unit in the country, and we would expect to diagnose in the order of 1,000 patients a year with breast cancer at the Nightingale, of which roughly about half come from the breast screening programme, and about half present to their GP with symptoms and have symptomatic breast cancer. Now, we have, in the last 6 months, we have operated on in the order of about 300 patients, whereas normal would probably be about 500 patients. Now, I think the patients that we've largely not operated on are potentially ladies who would have come through the breast screening programme, because early on in the pandemic, the breast screening programme had to close. But the good news is the breast screening program is back up and running. It's working at about 50% capacity, but building up rapidly. And they are on target, hopefully, to all of those ladies who've missed their screening to hopefully get their screening by November-ish. So we're catching up.
Yeah. I've got more to ask you about that, but as I understand it, you've been involved in a national study of what was happening in hospitals throughout the total lockdown period in regard to cancer patients and the treatment they were or weren't getting. And I think you're armed with statistics which are going to be published soon, but hopefully you can share them with us now before they're published. I mean, what did these statistics show, or maybe even set up at the start, the details of this study, what you're trying to find out, and then what it showed?
So we, and this study was run by one of my colleagues, Rajiv Dave, who's one of the consultants we work with. But what we did was contact all of the breast units in the UK and ask them to contribute data. So we got data on about 4,000 breast cancer patients that were treated in the alert level 4, as the government called it. So we're talking roughly mid-March to mid-May. So right at the very beginning, where we were fairly, as Sacha said, very limited with data about how to manage COVID and the impact of COVID. So from the very cautious time where can we give chemotherapy at all, to when we started to build confidence, get facilities in place. So it was in the worst period that we did this audit. And of women that came to the hospitals with breast cancer, the bottom line is they all got good treatment. It was all within normal standard guidelines. But the treatment itself might have been slightly altered compared to what we would have done before COVID, but it was still good, safe treatment. So to give you an idea, so probably about 60% of women have their treatment tweaked to fit in with COVID, but ways that it might have been tweaked would be things like sometimes we gave anti-hormone tablets for a while because we weren't sure if we could get someone into theatre because theatre capacity was reduced. So give them anti-hormone tablets till we could get them into theatre. Now that's a recognised standard treatment anyway, but we were doing it more. Other examples might be ladies at very low risk of getting breast cancer recurrence. In those, we might have thought about avoiding radiotherapy. But again, they fitted within the criteria of the benefits of radiotherapy being a bit borderline. And as Sacha said, there were ladies who didn't have chemotherapy, but again, carefully selected to make sure it was the ladies where the chemotherapy was borderline, whether they needed it anyway or not. However, there were, I'm selling the great good news story, but I can't, fib. There were some compromises that did happen. And I would say the big compromise was in breast reconstruction, because right at the very beginning, the whole sort of breast cancer community came together and wrote tight guidelines about what we should do, and were very reactive to the situation. And one sort of feeling across the board was we've got to do quick, safe operations and get people out quickly and get them onto the next phase of their cancer treatment. And that meant that we didn't do reconstructions. So for that period,
We'll come to reconstructions in a minute. I just sort of like to keep you to this area because I'm concerned, and so I think will the women be concerned, who wouldn't go to their GP or to their hospital at the time of lockdown because of the virus and all the worries about that. We all had to stay at home. We were only allowed out for 1 hour's exercise and all that sort of thing. So many people who should have gone didn't. So they lost that chance for early diagnosis and early treatment was lost. And that could have unfortunate consequences, and many of those women in that situation must be worrying about what the consequences of not going when they would have been. I mean, what have you got to say about that?
Well, I mean, again, we don't know which women are out there that haven't yet come to see us. But I think if we were working at 60% capacity, which is what our data is suggesting, and we had no screening or virtually no screening, then that implies that probably we're getting the majority of the patients who had symptoms, and they are the ones that we really need because they're the slightly more advanced ones. Now, one of the good things that happened was GPs switched completely to remote consultation, and if a patient rang a GP and said, I think I've got a lump, the GP said, I don't need to see you, I'm just going to send you straight in. So the GPs almost got bypassed, so that wasn't a barrier, and we got the patients in. But I'm sure there are ladies out there who were scared to come, and hopefully they're building more confidence now. But certainly, again, as Sacha said, we have made the Nightingale so safe. We have reduced all of those appointments that don't need to be face-to-face, so we've kept the number of people down so that there's lots of social distancing. You walk in the door, there's hand gels there, there's masks there, so you put we'll give you the mask, we'll give you the hand gel, but the chairs are all separated out and marked off so you're not sat near anyone else. The cleaning is just non-stop. All the staff are in PPE, so it's an incredibly safe situation. And that just reminds me of one statistic I do want to tell you about, Gordon, from our audit, was during that very worst period, only 1% of patients treated for breast cancer during the worst period actually tested positive for COVID. And in our audit of 4,000 patients, there were no COVID deaths.
Gosh, impressive. Just one other thing. I mean, bearing in mind, for instance, the local hospital here, Wythenshawe Hospital, and other hospitals like it, when they were heavily involved with the large admissions of these coronavirus patients, and their operating theatres therefore could not be used, but you needed to carry out surgery where necessary for breast cancer patients. So how did you get access to theatres for that sort of surgery to be carried out?
Oh, that was so impressive. How people worked together across Manchester was absolutely amazing. But what we did do effectively was take over the private sector. So at the manager level, the NHS worked with the private sector and said, can we have your hospitals as clean hospitals, and we'll keep the NHS hospitals more as, well, dirty COVID hospitals. So we tried to separate things out. So we instantly started doing a lot of our operating in the private hospitals. Then also for a big hospital like Wythenshawe, as the numbers came down, we were able to separate out the hospitals. So we've got two big theatre blocks. So we kept one as the acute sort of red zone where COVID patients could be operated on, or people you didn't know whether they had COVID or not had their surgery. And then we had the green zone where people were COVID free, and we introduced COVID testing, and also patients had to isolate before surgery as well. And we still now to some extent have that. So ladies, for example, I've been operating all day today. All the patients I operated on, they had their COVID test done on Monday. So we got their results back last night or this morning, and they were all told from their COVID test they had to completely self-isolate. So we're keeping it very safe, and we're getting through the operations.
Good stuff. Tell me now about reconstructive surgery. You were mentioning it earlier. Let's go into it a bit more detail now. You, of course, are a surgeon who performs reconstructive surgery. And presumably that sort of surgery has to be lower down the list of priorities, the way things are at the moment. Now, you weren't doing any at all. What is the latest situation? Are you doing any of that sort of surgery or not?
So we're now doing it selectively. So in patients who are lower risk and certain criteria, like for whatever reason they might need it now rather than later. Doing it later is a bigger problem. So we're doing it selectively, and it is opening up, but it's something that we are constantly revisiting. And it depends on, I suppose, the levels of COVID. So the risk to someone of being in the hospital for a prolonged time and the risk of getting COVID in the hospital, and also balanced against capacity. So it completely stopped for a while, but it was always being revisited, and we're opening it up. But don't know what's going to happen over the winter period, whether we might lose that again. So it's a watch this space, but we're doing everything we can to try and offer it.
Well, you said in your answer there, doing it later is a bigger problem. What is the problem? For instance, if you can't do it for somebody who's just had a breast removed now, and you have to wait for 6 months, 9 months, or even a year, I don't know, is it a much more difficult thing to do then, that operation?
It changes the techniques you might use. If you do the reconstruction at the time of the mastectomy, then the fundamental thing is you keep all of the skin of the breast and you shell out the breast from the inside. If a lady has to go flat, then we have to remove more of that skin. So either we have to bring in fresh skin from somewhere else, or we have to stretch up the existing skin. So the techniques are slightly different. But there's some situations where it's not right from a cancer viewpoint to do the reconstruction immediately. Or someone just simply isn't fit enough, or the priority is oncology treatment. Let's do it really quick, straight to chemotherapy, and we revisit the reconstruction later.
Okay, our time's virtually up. I've got to ask you this last quick question for a fairly brief answer. But you are, of course, chair of Prevent Breast Cancer Scientific Advisory Board. As I explained earlier, that's the board, the group that sits and listens to people come forward offering new research they would like to do, and you consider them all, decide which ones appeal, and grant them the funds to do it. I talked about it to you on the stage a year ago, etc. And now we've heard from Lester that future projects are frozen. No new research programs can be funded at this stage, and you must be gutted by that.
Yeah, it is really tough, and we're desperate to get that money. So, because often with research, there's an element of momentum as well, and particularly in clinical trials, maintaining that momentum. All these services and facilities are in place, so you've got to keep that momentum going. Or in laboratory trials, you've grown all of these cells, you've got all of these models in place. It's all about momentum. So the sooner we get to full pelt, the better. And yeah, we want those new ideas because it's such a fast moving area. And the sooner we do the research, the sooner we can impact patient outcomes.
Cliona, good to talk to you again. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Well, there we are. We're coming back very quickly to the end now. But to wrap up the proceedings, we're going to go back to our chairman, Lester Barr. And he has an important message for all of you watching, and for our supporters in general, as the charities just battle away to find new ways and means of raising money for our various projects. But I briefly want to talk to him first about breast screening. I mean, it has been mentioned several times now in the last two interviews, but it is so important and there's so much concern to many people. So let's say welcome back to Lester. And Lester, when coronavirus hit and the big lockdown period came then at the end of March, breast screening, as we heard, had to be abandoned for a while, for quite a while, really. You can maybe tell us how long. I mean, how serious a situation do you assess that? How serious was it, and what impact would it have had on those women who would otherwise have been screened in that period?
Well, I think as you've heard from Sacha already, the screening program got back up and running actually in July. So it shut down at the end of March and then restarted in July. And they're now getting through the backlog, to my understanding. I'm not directly involved in the screening program. All I can tell you is what's in the public domain, and how it impacts us as a charity, I guess, and our supporters. So that's the good news. The current difficulty is the screening committee have announced that they're temporarily not going to screen women over 70. so that they concentrate on the 50 to 70 age group to get through the backlog, and that's their top priority. So that's a disappointment to us because we're all, passionate believers in screening and early diagnosis, and hopefully that will come back on stream soon. There's the government report indicating that we need to train more radiologists and radiographers. That's very important to us as well, because we do believe that again is a key for the future. And we've got exciting plans for screening in the future. Some of our research indicates that we can make it much more clever, structured in a much more clever way for the future. And also we can start to screen women at a much younger age. We'd love to start screening women maybe 35 or even at 30 to try and prevent breast cancer in that young age group. So for us, getting the screening program back up and running, yes, it's important. And then training new specialists for the future, because one of the keys to preventing breast cancer will be a really effective screening program in the future.
So what is your message to women who would have been naturally screened in that period of lockdown, but couldn't for all those months? And I'm sure sit at home worrying about the possible consequences of not having been able to take up the appointment. What's your advice to them?
Well, I think a couple of things to say. One is that a delay of 3 months, let's say, in having screening is unlikely to have any material benefit. It's still going to be caught at a very early stage with excellent outcomes. And the other thing is that if you haven't been called for your routine screening, but you've got a symptom, the breast clinics are up and running, and you ring your GP, the GP will send a referral into your local breast clinic, wherever it is, and usually you should be seen within a couple of weeks. So if you're worried you've got a symptom, then you're straight into the system, and the screening program runs separately from that. So there's the diagnostic clinic system, and then there's the screening system, which is different.
Yeah, and Cliona touched on it, but you work in that Nightingale Centre all the time. What do you also say to people to assure them if they're still worried about going to a hospital of any sort? What are you going to say to them about going there for an appointment? It's important for them to feel safe, etc. Are you convinced, and can you assure them it's pretty well safe to come for your appointment at the Nightingale or any other hospital?
I think the same applies right across the country to all the breast units. They are often tucked away in a different part of the hospital away from COVID patients. And there are strict COVID protocols in place. So it's very safe to come to a breast clinic, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Finally, just to our charity and the battle to keep on finding ways of raising vital funds. And we've heard from both Sacha and Cliona how important it is that we get this money and continue. What's your vital message to all our supporters who are watching or who aren't watching now but can pick this program up whenever they're ready to watch it? What do you want to say to them?
Well, I think Cliona expressed it very well, which was the sooner our research is back up and running at full pelt, at full speed, the sooner we can really impact on clinical outcomes. And that means preventing breast cancer, early diagnosis of breast cancer. We've got ambitious plans for the future. We've got some great ideas coming through. We want to unfreeze our pipeline to let new work commence, and we need you to contribute to it. So I'm very grateful to everybody watching this. I apologize there was a wrong number on the ticker tape. There was a missing 7 at the beginning of this stream. If you used it, no money was taken at the beginning of this hour, and the correct number is on the screen now. So it's 70470. So if you're contributing through that, thank you very much indeed. And otherwise, you can contribute through our website. We need your support in the months ahead, and we're going to together. We are going to prevent breast cancer for the sake of the next generation.
Strong words. Thank you very much indeed, Lester. I'll see you in a minute when I nip next door where you are. But thank you very much indeed for that. And a big thank you also, obviously, to Sacha and Cliona for their excellent contributions tonight. Big thank you to all of you for watching, and again to Pixel Inspiration for the use of their splendid facilities tonight. Well, I hope you found it both informative and useful and answered many of the questions you might have had. We are feeling our way a bit tonight. That's the first time we've done it, so we'll get more polished as we go along. And we do hope that more of these type programs will take place in the months ahead to keep you up to date with all that's happening. And we'll keep you posted on when they would be and what the content of those programs would be. In the meantime, it just leaves me to say goodbye to you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and most importantly, stay safe. Bye-bye.